I used to think death was simple. A heartbeat stops, the body cools, and what's left is just flesh and bone. But after years working in morgues, I learned that the dead don't always stay still. Some places hold on to more than bodies. I worked as a morgue technician for 3 years at a hospital just outside New Orleans. The night shift was usually quiet, paperwork, temperature checks, and the occasional autopsy prep for the morning. You get used to being around the dead after a while. You stop seeing faces and start seeing tasks. That's how I kept my sanity. It was late summer, humid like only Louisiana can be, and the morgue's air conditioner had been failing for weeks. The cold storage still worked fine, but the main room where we processed incoming bodies felt heavy with that sticky warmth that clings to you. I remember it clearly because that night, the humidity seemed to make everything feel slower. We had brought in 3 new bodies that evening. 2 from natural causes, 1 from an accident. A car crash victim, mid-30s, male, no ID yet. I was alone for the shift since the other tech called out sick, so I handled the intake by myself. I did the usual, cleaned the surfaces, checked the cooler temperatures, logged the arrivals, and rolled the new bodies into the holding room. The car crash victim went into the middle table for temporary processing. His name wasn't known yet, so I labeled him John Doe 14 to 117. He had deep bruises around the chest and shoulders, and a few glass fragments still stuck in his arm. I started to clean the surface wounds, standard procedure, before bagging him. At one point, I leaned over to wipe his arm and noticed his left hand twitched. Not much, just a small jerk like a muscle spasm. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes bodies move from nerve reactions or trapped gases. Still, it caught me off guard. I checked again, and his fingers were still. I shrugged it off, finished the prep, and left him uncovered for the pathologist in the morning. Around midnight, I went to the office to fill out some reports. The morgue was quiet except for the constant hum of the refrigerators. About half an hour later, I heard a dull thud. It came from the prep room. I froze, waiting to hear it again. Sometimes the metal gurneys creak or settle, especially if they're not locked properly. But this sounded different, like something falling over. I walked back through the double doors. The room was dimly lit by the overhead fluorescents, one of which flickered a little. Everything looked the same at first glance. Then I noticed that the body on the middle table, John Doe 14 to 117, wasn't lying flat anymore. He was sitting upright, arms bent, torso forward slightly, like someone halfway through getting out of bed. His head hung low, chin near his chest. For a second, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. My stomach dropped, and I felt my mouth go dry. I stood completely still, staring at him, waiting for him to move again. He didn't. It took me nearly a full minute before I could get close enough to check. His body was rigid, cold, and lifeless, exactly like it should have been. The position made no sense. It takes muscle activity to sit up like that. Even post-mortem rigidity couldn't lift a torso that high from a flat surface. I called the on-call pathologist, Dr. Abrams, told him what I saw. He laughed it off at first, said it was probably gas buildup. I told him that wasn't possible. The arms had flexed too. He said to just document it, lay the body flat again, and he'd check it in the morning. So I did. It took effort to move him back. His joints were stiff, and it felt like the body resisted slightly when I tried to push it down. I know how that sounds, but that's exactly how it felt, like pushing against something alive but unmoving. I strapped him down this time, shoulder and thigh belts, to keep him from shifting. Then I locked the wheels on the gurney, double-checked everything, and went back to my office. At around 2:30 a.m., the noise came again. Another thud, heavier this time. I looked at the CCTV feed we had in the prep room. The camera angle showed the tables and freezers clearly. At first, nothing was happening. I stared for maybe 10 seconds. Then, slowly, the strap on the middle table started to tighten, like something pulling against it. The upper strap snapped. The body sat up again. No sudden jerk, no levitation. Just movement, gradual and deliberate. His head turned slightly, and even through the grainy footage, I could see his mouth open a little. That was enough for me. I called security. By the time they got there, the body was lying flat again. Both straps were broken, and one of the steel brackets on the table had bent. We checked the cameras again. The video feed had glitched right at the moment he sat up. The frame jumped, then resumed, skipping almost 5 seconds. Dr. Abrams reviewed the footage the next morning and wrote it off as an electrical fault. The crash victim's body was sent for autopsy later that day. Cause of death: blunt force trauma, internal bleeding. No abnormalities otherwise. The pathologist didn't mention anything unusual, except that the muscles showed more tension than expected for the time of death. A few days later, a detective came by. They'd identified the man. His name was Walter Harmon. He crashed into a tree off Highway 90. But the strange part was that he hadn't died on impact. According to the medical report, his heart had still been faintly beating when the EMTs arrived, though he had no pulse by the time he reached the ER. That detail stayed with me. Maybe he hadn't been completely gone when they brought him in. Maybe what I saw was the last twitch of life, trying to leave the body. Still, it doesn't explain how a body could sit up hours after being declared dead, under refrigeration, with no muscle activity left. After that night, I refused to work the morgue alone again. I transferred to day shifts 3 months later. The room where it happened is still used, but every new tech who starts there gets the same warning we used to give each other quietly. I worked in a county morgue in Cleveland during the late 90s. Back then, most of the old buildings hadn't been renovated in decades. The walls were that pale green color hospitals used to favor. The air always smelled faintly of bleach and formalin, and the refrigeration units ran constantly, loud enough to become background noise. When I started, I was just a body attendant, moving remains from the hospital to the county morgue, tagging them, logging time of arrival, and assisting with autopsies. It wasn't glamorous, but I didn't mind the work. The dead don't talk back, and if you're organized, the job runs smooth. The morgue had 2 cold rooms, each with a wall of body drawers stacked 4 high, 8 across, 32 in total, numbered left to right. For some reason, drawer number 7, bottom row, far left, always gave me trouble. At first, it was small stuff. It wouldn't close all the way, or it'd stick halfway. Maintenance checked it several times and said it was fine. Tracks greased, hinges solid. I even cleaned it out myself once, thinking maybe something had spilled or frozen inside. Nothing, but it kept sliding open an inch or 2 whenever the room got quiet. You could shove it closed, hear the latch click, turn around, and 30 seconds later, it'd be cracked open again. Most of us just joked about it. 7 wants some air, someone would say. That sort of gallows humor keeps you sane in this line of work. But after a few weeks, I started noticing something else. Every time that drawer was used, it was for a suicide. Not once for a natural death or accident. Always a self-inflicted case. I didn't catch the pattern right away. It was the pathologist, Dr. Landry, who mentioned it one night during paperwork. He said, "You notice how 7 only holds jumpers and gunshots?" I thought he was kidding until I checked the logs. He was right. Out of the last 12 bodies stored there, every single one had taken their own life. Now, that could just be coincidence. We got a lot of suicides, but drawer 7 started acting worse after that. One evening, we had a hanging case from the river bridge, male, early 40s. The intake was routine. I tagged him, logged his details, and rolled him into 7. The latch caught like always. I finished my shift around midnight and locked up. Next morning, when I came back, the drawer was fully open. Not a crack, completely extended. The body halfway out like someone had tried to pull it. The security footage didn't show anyone entering the room between midnight and 6. No motion alarms triggered either. We figured maybe the rail slipped, though that never happened before or after. Maintenance replaced the latch and inspected every other drawer. All fine, but I could tell Dr. Landry didn't buy the explanation either. After that, it became a running issue. Whenever a suicide came in, that drawer seemed to open itself overnight. If we tried assigning the body somewhere else, something small would go wrong. Drawer 7's lights would flicker. The temperature alarm would ping. Once, the compressor cut out entirely for just that unit while the others stayed stable. Eventually, the supervisor made a policy. All suicides go to 7. That way, if something weird's going to happen, it happens there. I hated that rule. It made the job feel wrong, like we were feeding the drawer what it wanted. One case really stuck with me. It was a teenage boy, 15, gunshot wound to the head. His father found him in their garage. The kind of scene you don't forget. The medical examiner cleared him for storage late that night, and I was the one on shift. I rolled him in, filled out the paperwork, and shut the drawer. I remember because I said out loud, "Stay closed this time." An hour later, while finishing up inventory, I heard the metal clang of a drawer sliding open. I didn't even have to look. I knew which one it was. When I walked over, drawer 7 was wide open. The light inside flickered once, and the kid's body was exactly where I had placed it. But something about his face made my stomach twist. His mouth wasn't closed anymore. It hung slightly open, like he tried to breathe. Bodies can shift from rigor relaxing, I know that. But rigor hadn't even set in yet. I checked the position of his hands, the angle of the tag string. They were different too. The hand that had been laid across his stomach now rested against his side. I shut the drawer again and locked it. We didn't usually lock them, but I needed to. Next morning, Dr. Landry came in early. He called me over with this strange look on his face. The lock on 7 was still intact, but the drawer was open about 2 inches. Inside, frost had formed thick around the edges. Only that one unit, nowhere else. He said quietly, "He's been moved." I didn't say anything. We just stood there, both of us staring at the half-open drawer. 2 days later, we got another suicide. I remember telling the other tech, Vince, that maybe we should break the rule and put the body somewhere else. He laughed and said, "Man, you're starting to sound like the nurses upstairs." We put the body in drawer 11 instead. That night, the alarm system triggered a temperature warning, only for drawer 11. It was reading 40 degrees warmer than it should. When Vince checked, the drawer was empty. The body was gone. We found him next morning in drawer 7. No one admitted to moving him. That was the last straw for me. I filed a report, asked to be reassigned to pathology work only. They granted it within a week. Vince stayed in cold storage duty. 2 months later, he quit. He told me he'd heard knocking. Slow, deliberate knocks from inside drawer 7 during his shift. He swore he wasn't imagining it. Said it came in threes, always right before the drawer slid open on its own. The unit was eventually replaced during a renovation in 2002. The new drawers are stainless steel, digital locks, no mechanical slides, but the numbering stayed the same. One of the new attendants I met years later told me something that made my chest tighten. He said drawer 7 still glitches sometimes. The temperature sensor reads off for no reason, and occasionally, when the compressor starts up, that drawer's latch gives a faint click, like something inside just shifted. He said he doesn't open it unless he has to. I told him that's a good idea, because I still remember the last night I worked near that wall. I was logging release forms, and I glanced over just once. The drawers were all closed, except 7. It wasn't open, but the metal front had a faint outline of a handprint in the frost, a full palm, pressed from the inside. I didn't plan on working in a morgue. I was hired at the county hospital as a janitor, just looking for steady work after a long layoff. A few months in, one of the morgue attendants quit without notice, and the supervisor asked if I wanted to fill in until they found someone new. It paid better, and I didn't have much to lose, so I said yes. Most of the job was routine, moving bodies in and out, helping the medical examiner during autopsies, keeping the place clean. It wasn't pleasant, but I got used to it faster than I expected. After the first few weeks, you stop thinking of them as people. You start focusing on the process. Tag, store, document release. The morgue had 3 cold rooms. Rooms 1 and 2 were newer, with better insulation and electronic temperature control. Cold room 3 was the oldest section, built sometime in the 60s. It was smaller, darker, and the temperature gauge was still a manual dial on the wall. The others avoided it whenever possible because it had a habit of acting up. As they put it, temperature alarms triggering, lights flickering, compressors running too long. By the time I started, they'd stopped using it for general storage. It mostly held overflow bodies during high death periods, winter flu season, car accidents, that sort of thing. The first time I went in there, I noticed something off. The air felt heavier. Not colder, heavier, like it pressed down on you. The overhead light buzzed faintly even when off, and sometimes the hum from the refrigeration units in the other rooms would fade when you stepped inside. I tried not to dwell on it. It was late March 2003 when we had a week of unusually high deaths, mostly pneumonia cases from a bad outbreak. Cold rooms 1 and 2 filled up fast. Dr. Howard, the chief examiner, told me to start using 3 again. He said the old system still worked fine. Just needs a firm hand on the dial. I went in, adjusted the thermostat to 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and started stacking the new arrivals. Most were elderly patients, but there was one body that stood out, female, early 20s, unidentified, found behind a bus station downtown. No ID, no visible trauma, just pronounced dead on arrival. She went into cold room 3, top left rack. That was the night things started going wrong. Around 11 p.m., I was in the office finishing paperwork when the temperature alarm went off. I checked the log. Cold room 3 had dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, way below set range. I went down to the basement to check. When I opened the door, the air that hit me wasn't cold. It was warm, like someone had turned the heat on instead of the refrigeration. The dial still read 38 degrees Fahrenheit, but my breath wasn't visible, and the air had that dense, stale quality of a closed-up room. Inside, the overhead light was dim, flickering slightly. The racks looked fine, except for the top left. The door to that compartment was cracked open, maybe 2 inches. I could see frost melting down the edge of the metal. I closed it, rechecked the dial, and left. When I got back upstairs, the alarm reset itself, reading normal temperature again. I didn't say anything. Next morning, Dr. Howard asked why the Jane Doe hadn't been moved to refrigeration 2 for the autopsy. I told him she was still stored in 3. He frowned and said, "No, I signed her out last night." I pulled up the log. No one had come into the morgue after me. The camera feed for that hallway had frozen around midnight and resumed at 6. We went down together. The compartment door was wide open this time, and the tray was empty. We found her body half an hour later, in the middle of the room floor, uncovered. There were no footprints, no drag marks, nothing. Just her body, laid flat, as if someone had set her down carefully. Dr. Howard's expression stayed calm, but his hand shook when we lifted her back. He didn't say a word. He just told me to move all the other bodies out of that room and seal it until maintenance checked it. That was supposed to be the end of it. But 2 nights later, I had to go back in. Maintenance cleared the system, said the compressor was fine. The temperature held steady. I went in alone to log final readings. When I walked in, I could hear a faint sound. Not mechanical, softer, irregular. It took me a second to realize it sounded like breathing. Slow, shallow breaths, somewhere near the back racks. I stood still for maybe 10 seconds before it stopped. When I turned toward the sound, the overhead light dimmed again, and the temperature gauge needle dropped hard, straight down to 0. That's when I saw the frost spreading across the floor, from the direction of the top left rack. It crept fast, thin like spiderwebs of ice. I backed out and shut the door. The sound on the other side changed. It wasn't breathing anymore. It was like a quiet tapping, fingernails on metal. I told Dr. Howard everything. He didn't believe me, but agreed to stop using that room permanently. They moved all the equipment out and shut it down a week later. The official note in the record said system inefficiency and instability. About a month after that, the county sent over a new refrigeration contractor to remove the old units. One of them came upstairs during the job, pale as a sheet. He said there was something wrong with the back wall. When they pulled out the racks, they found moisture behind the insulation, and inside that section, a patch of frost shaped roughly like a human outline, arms crossed, head tilted slightly to the side. They said it melted within minutes after they turned the power off. The room was sealed again and eventually converted into storage. I left the job the following year. Last I heard, the new attendants use only cold rooms 1 and 2.